Hi, friends, and welcome to the StoryForge podcast. I'm Lyle Smith, your host, and today we're talking with Sean Fagan of Opus Performance Tours in Red Bank, New Jersey. He founded this company, created this company some 20 plus years ago, where he creates, organizes, plans, and executes tours for musical groups all around the world. They travel to Europe and Eastern Europe and South America and all over the place. And they're choruses and orchestras and marching bands, all sorts of musical groups. And it really makes the groups what they are. He really has a hand in helping these groups become something bigger than maybe they even envision sometimes. So it's a really exciting business to be involved in. He does great work, but as a travel and performance business, the coronavirus pandemic has hit him very, very hard. But on the other hand, if you ask him, he has a lot of interesting ideas about where the industry is headed, how things are changing, how he's evolving in his own business, and it's an exciting conversation. So I hope you enjoy it. Here's Sean.
But he has a trio that he plays with regularly down there, was playing regularly with until all this craziness started happening. And he, like you, you're one of, numerous people I spoke to who are friends of mine who had either arts people, musicians, performers, that all had like everything started going on Friday the 13th in March.
That was actually the telltale day for me as well.
Yeah, I remember we talked about it a little bit after that because it's just like all of a sudden things changed,
Yeah.
And how are things going now?
Um,
Have things stabilized a bit, improved a bit?
well, in all honesty, I don't think the travel business is going to improve until a vaccine comes around, or at
Right.
least the fairly sure uh, promise of a vaccine. So,
Right.
if they say, Fauci has come out recently and said he's fairly confident that in the beginning of next year that he can realistically see a vaccine,
Right.
available. Until that time, no one wants to commit to anything.
Right.
There are businesses that are going to travel businesses that are going to start offer projects and stuff for 2021
Right.
because everyone has to. 2020 is
Right.
lost.
Right.
Um, so, yeah, I think looking forward to 2021,
Right.
in whatever form it's going to be, will be the start of something better. Right
Right.
now, for my business, my groups, my groups work a year or more in advance to travel, and so we were working at groups that were going to travel in March, April, May, June,
Right.
into July, and of course, when the first March group had to cancel on March 13th, Friday the 13th, the day of their departure, basically, when they were supposed to travel.
Right.
That was the beginning, and then within 2 weeks, every group either canceled or postponed.
Right.
We gave an extra option. Typically, the contract said, if you cancel, this is the penalty.
Right.
But in this circumstance, we decided that it would be good if we could probably recoup more of the funds from our vendors if we were to postpone. And
Right.
so we gave that option to all of our clients, and about half of them took it, and half of them didn't.
Right.
So we're crossing our fingers for the ones who did next year that we can actually fulfill the contracts and
Right.
travel. So, but there's no it's kind of a weird time right now.
It's well, every business has to handle these things in a different way, and we're seeing this more in sporting events too. A lot of sporting, some have canceled outright, some have postponed, like the Ryder Cup, the golf event just had a statement yesterday that they're postponing it till 2021.
Sure.
So they're pushing it back a year, and it's an event that only happens every 2 years. So they're sort of able to do that without too much difficulty. But you wonder why you would postpone versus can't just cancel outright. But your description makes a little sense.
Yeah, it is. There's a lot of leeway for vendors right now to say we can't give you your money back,
Right.
but we can apply it towards towards X, Y, or Z. And
Right.
I've had that with a lot of we work all over the world, and most of our groups for this year were focused on Europe.
Right.
And Europe, they said they would carry over funds for the groups for next year, the majority, the lion's share.
Right.
But if they canceled outright, these companies are, everyone is trying to survive, and everyone sees and saw fairly early on that that travel is going to be devastated this year, and they have to keep their doors open. So, I think, as you mentioned, businesses, small businesses, I'm talking about. The
Right.
big businesses, they get their money in from other places, and hopefully not from our U.S. government. But, the small businesses, everyone's trying to stay financially solvent right
Right.
now, and to be able to still be around when things open up, and they
Yeah.
will open up. Travel will come back. So.
Oh, no doubt. I mean, that's one thing I say. I think I've said that to every single person I've interviewed on this thing so far is just, we know this is not going to last forever. Sooner or later, there's going to be a treatment and a vaccine, and things are going to get back to some semblance of normal. But, normal is not going to be what normal was before, I think, at least in some areas.
Yeah, definitely in some areas. There's definitely going to be some carryover. I've seen a lot of. The transition to digital is pretty remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
What's been happening the last 2 months, and there are some people that I know of that I'm connected to overseas. A lot of them in travel have just been laid off,
Right.
or some have been furloughed, but the majority have been laid off. And this is in Ireland, in England, in Croatia, in France, in Sweden. All over they've been devastated.
Mhm.
But some of them have come back and said, we're doing something different. For example, there's a guy based in Scotland.
Mhm.
And he just released. He was doing festivals, and from those festivals, he was doing like short tours for groups.
Okay.
And I don't think he was a huge operator, but his groups completely vanished, and his
Yeah.
work for the next year completely vanished.
Yeah.
And so he's pivoted to starting a website where, if you want to learn Scottish fiddle music, or if you want to learn how to play,
Okay.
so you got traditional Scottish musicians,
Mm-hmm.
and brought them all to a website and started virtual classes.
Wow.
So I've seen that. I had one friend who's a piano player, based in New York City, and he's had his own, learn my piano technique, or learn piano from me. He's had it for probably 5 years.
Okay.
I remember when he started it, and he's had a nice following, but he's wonderfully positioned.
Yeah.
Because people have got time on their hands.
Yep.
They're sitting at home.
Yep.
And, they've got access to a computer. So it's really blossomed and made people aware. So there's going to be a huge digital impact
Mhm.
for across so many different sectors.
Right.
And part of what's going to part of what will make it large and consistent is not just the younger people who have been who are digitally savvy,
Right.
and the middle people, who are still savvy but maybe not on the cutting edge.
Right.
But it's the older people too. This is across the age range, because the older people have over the last I had mentioned that I was hosting some gatherings on Zoom
Right.
for my family, and I have a very large family. For my mother's 90th, I was reaching out to some of her friends who were in their 80s and 90s and tutoring them on how to use Zoom and how to get
Wow.
onto their thing. And I'd be on the phone for 2 hours. But they're all open to it,
Right.
and willing to do that. And it's because of the circumstance.
Right. Well, it's interesting because you have that that need to connect is still there. That need to, you see an awful lot of creative outreach from different artists and different musicians, singers, players who are doing things online, even if it's a show from their basement studio. That they didn't do before, but
Sure.
people still have a need to have it, which is really kind of encouraging, even though it's having a massively negative impact on some of these small venues out there. Um,
And the performers.
and the performers, yeah. I mean, I've spoken to numerous of those, a few on the podcast here, and they're just, they're some of them are getting like ultra creative in the way they try and get out there, and some of them are turning to other types of revenue streams and trying to diversify in a way they haven't been able to before. I have a friend who's actually now like making furniture and things because he doesn't have any of his performances to do.
You look into your skill bag of tricks and you say, what can I pull out?
You got to make it work, right? So, so you have a big family. You said you're eighth in a family of 12 siblings.
Yes.
You have six, what is it, 6 brothers and 5 sisters?
6 brothers and 5 sisters.
Wow. And your mom just celebrated her 90th?
Just celebrated her 90th, yeah.
That's fantastic. That must have been a fun Zoom call.
Kind of like herding cats.
Yeah.
I think for her 90th we had, I think someone counted. I was playing the host, but I think we had
Right.
70 or 80 people on the call.
Wow.
There would be families, but
Sure.
but there'd be, we had 2 pages of Zoom blocks on the screen.
That's awesome.
But it was fun. Yeah, it was a lot of fun growing up in a household like that.
I would think. I wonder because we'll get into your background a little bit because I find it fascinating. But the how does because I'm always interested in how someone grows into creating their own business, their own living, their own way of making a living, and like I joke, I started my business. I didn't really have an entrepreneurial model to follow in my life. My dad worked for a big corporation for a long time. My mom was a school teacher. It was my wife who is an acupuncturist and has her own business, and her father, who's a veterinarian who has 2 of his own practices, who kind of made me think, oh boy, I could actually do this. I could actually have my own business. How does a kid, 8th child in a string of 12, get into
It's interesting you say that, in terms of models, because my father worked for Sharing Corporation, which was, I think they were taken over by Merck, I think, at one point.
Mhm.
But at the time he was working there was Sharing Plow, and he worked for them for about 35 years. And I actually worked they had a program one summer where, children of employees could enter a lottery and work for the summer at the
Right.
facility. So it was an interesting summer. I commuted in with my father on a van to work, and worked in an assay lab for a summer.
Wow. And where was that?
I don't have a scientific bone in my body. That was in Kenilworth.
Okay, Kenilworth, New Jersey. Okay.
But that was, as you said, that was my model. My model was my father, going to work for a corporation. My
Right.
mother was a homemaker, raising 12 children,
Right.
which was a job in and of itself. I knew that that job was not available to me. Uh, so but I, the, the start for me, I think, was I always, when I got to college, I wanted to be involved with something.
Hmm.
So I joined, I first joined something, I tried out for something that was called the Queen's Guard at Rutgers. And
Okay.
it's a trick drill team. And we're two guys on my floor in my dormitory who were, one was the captain and the other, they might have been actually both the captains of the team. And they're like, oh, you should try out. And this is my freshman year. And so sure, they showed me a video and it looked pretty cool. And they traveled. And that was what was attractive to me. I
Right.
wasn't into the military and the guns and everything. So it was a trick rifle team. And I tried out and went through about a month of tryouts and stuff. And, the last day of the tryouts, they said, hey, we're going to, you're in. Congratulations. And we're going to start practicing next week. And you'll just need to get a crew cut, and then you're all set. And I said, what? I said, excuse me? And he said, you have to get a crew cut. And I said, I am so sorry. If you had told me this at the beginning, I would not have wasted your time. When I was growing up with 7 boys in the family, my father was not going to go out and pay a barber to cut 7 boys' hair. So we would all go to the basement, and my father would take out the buzzers, and
Yeah.
he would give us all crew cuts. And,
Right.
for the first 10 years of my life, I think I had a crew cut. So when I was 18 years old, the last thing I wanted to do was go back to my childhood crew cut days.
Right. Right.
So I eventually decided I still wanted to be involved. Unfortunately, that wasn't it. And I ended up joining 2 things. I joined the crew team at Rutgers, and I joined a choir. There was a mixed choir, and there were a couple different musical organizations and or choirs at Rutgers. And one was the mixed choir, one was the Glee Club, which was quite famous and had quite a storied history. But the choir was going to be touring the following year, I found out. And so I joined them just for that.
Just for the travel.
Just so I could travel. And I had sung in a choir in high school. So I joined them for that, and that was the beginning actually of the work that I'm doing. I went on a tour the following year. We went to Poland during Solidarity time, when Lech Walesa and
Oh, wow.
Solidarity movement.
That must have been exciting.
And we were actually in Poland the same time that John Paul II returned after he became the Pope.
Wow.
So we were kind of like, we would arrive to a city right after John Paul had left, and it was like, the parade had gone, the parade ended, we were at the tail end, and there was like all the papal bunting, the yellow and white papal bunting was hanging down, and John Paul pictures were everything, so that was my beginning with the work that I do. And so that's how it started. So I was following what I like to do,
Hmm.
and that was my introduction to the work itself.
Right. So
I didn't know it was work. I was just
Right.
a travel. Yeah, I was a tour member.
Right. Did you start getting involved in the organization of all that at some point, or?
Not at that point. I mean, I graduated from college. I had a degree in business and computers, and but I always loved languages. I had studied Spanish in high school and in first year of college, but I was frustrated that I never spoke it.
Right.
It was always just studying. And I decided my senior year to study French. But I said, if I'm going to study French, I'm going to study in
Right.
France. So I did 2 semesters of French. I had a wonderful teacher, Jerry Flieger, who was fantastic at working with students, beginners who spoke French to us the whole time. And then the summer after my graduation, I studied in France for 6 weeks. So I always had that interest in languages. Then I graduated, studied French in France. I came back to the States, and I worked. Actually worked in bartending because I always wanted to. My father killed me. He was like, "You got it. You have a degree." I made a lot of money.
Yeah.
I worked for I made a lot of money. Worked for about a year. Made a lot of money, and then I decided to get a business job in my field, which was as an internal auditor. I hated it. And during that time as an internal auditor, I decided that I wanted to apply for the Peace Corps. So I did that when I was working at this. I worked at that internal auditing job for a year.
Right.
The Peace Corps told me, my recruiter said you need to work, to have more volunteer work.
Okay.
So I quit the auditing job and I went back to bartending. And I was always telling people at the time that I worked in bartending to support my volunteer habit. So then I did a lot of volunteer work for the next 8 months, and then I got into the Peace Corps in the following July. I left Africa for 2 years.
Wow, that must have been an experience.
It was, but just before I left there, because your question was about, how did I get into this work?
Right.
That's a long story to say. While I was bartending, and about a month before I was to leave for Africa, the director of the company that did the tour when I was in college,
right,
and my former choir director, and a bunch of the former singers came into my bar. I mean, which was kind of unusual because it was about 30 minutes away from New Brunswick.
Right.
Came into my bar, and I was like, holy cow. I'm like, hey, how you doing? And, the president of the company that had taken us said, oh, what are you doing? I said, well, I'm biding my time here. I'm going into the Peace Corps in a month.
Right.
Great to see you.
Yeah.
Very cordial. And that was that. And he said, oh, give me your number so we can stay in touch. And so I gave him my number. And about a week later, he called me and he said, listen, I was wondering if you can we have a group coming in from Leningrad, Russia.
Okay.
It's a girls' choir, and we need someone to escort them up and down the East Coast. They're coming in, and they're going to do they're going to Vermont for an organization called Project Harmony. This is the first group from Russia, and they're staying in homes, which my understanding was that was the first time that Russian kids were allowed to stay in homes in the U.S. And this organization was the only organization that the State Department would allow to funnel this group from Russia to Project Harmony. Project Harmony since, and even to this day, is much, much larger, and they've done wonderful things.
Right.
But that was the first tour, and I was the tour leader for that, and took them up and down the East Coast. And I said to the director, I said, you do realize I don't speak Russian? He said, I understand that. They have tour guides who speak Russian. So it was fascinating. And so I did the 2-week tour. It was a wonderful, amazing experience. And came back, and a couple weeks later, I left for, training for Peace Corps. And then I left for Africa for 2 years.
Wow.
And before I came back, a couple months before, I wrote a letter to the director.
Right.
And said, hey, remember me?
Right.
Got any jobs? And so he actually said, you can interview for a job when you get back. And because they had a position opening up, and it was it was always a small company. It was a nonprofit, always a small company, and they had a position opening up. And I interviewed for it like a week after I came back and got the job. So it was probably the smoothest transition.
Fantastic.
From Peace Corps to working life.
Right.
So that was my weird way of getting into it. So it was kind of a combination of pursuing the things I like and luck, just sheer luck,
That's something that comes up over and over again when you talk to people about, especially people who have sort of an entrepreneurial spirit and have followed a path into whatever business it is they've created, is these sort of serendipitous moments that maybe you don't recognize them as that at the time, but you go back and look at them and you're like, wow, yeah, that was really sort of a stroke of luck there.
Well, exactly. I mean, I don't even know why they were in town.
Right.
I don't even recall. I probably asked them at the time, but they were 30 minutes from Rutgers.
Right.
They could have gone into any restaurant.
Right.
I didn't have to be working that shift. It was a daytime shift.
Right.
I hated daytime shifts.
Right.
You rarely made that much money at all.
Right.
So they came in. So you know, so it was just sheer luck, serendipitous, fate, whatever you want to call it.
Right.
But
And
yeah, but that made all the difference.
that's really cool. And so did you, in that job that you got, is that where you worked with groups um, sort of behind the Iron Curtain?
Yes, that was their. The organization is still around. It's called Friendship Ambassadors,
Uh-huh.
but their specialty was working behind the Iron Curtain. It was
Right.
started by a gentleman named Harry Morgan, who was bankrolled by DeWitt Wallace from
Okay.
Reader's Digest.
Ah.
Back in the 70s, Harry Morgan started the Ambassadors of Friendship
Mm-hmm.
and started exchanges between what was Romania and the U.S. It was where he started out.
Right.
And at one point in the 70s, was bringing up to 3,000 American performing groups, 3,000 individuals to Romania during the summertime.
Right.
So they were just overrun with Americans. In the
Right.
70s, the U.S. and Romania were on good terms. We liked Ceausescu at that point.
Yeah.
In
Right.
the 80s, it got a little bit weird, um, but it was pretty amazing. And it expanded into the rest of the Iron Curtain countries. But yeah, for the time that I worked there, for the first 5 years, or 6 years, it was actually solely Iron Curtain countries.
Right.
It was
And it
pretty
was
fascinating.
almost, yeah, it's got to be interesting because I mean, it was always the performing arts and maybe sports were the ones that did the exchanges coming from places that you couldn't otherwise go to.
Sure,
So
sure.
those were the things that kind of broke those, cracked those doors open a little bit. I remember my sister was a ballet dancer from like age 3, and she danced with a small company in my hometown, and then with New Jersey Ballet, and then she danced at American Ballet Theater as a youngster
Wow.
student for a while, and but we met all, and her teacher at our small school in Bernardsville, New Jersey, was from Romania, and was she from Romania? I don't recall. Anyway, but she brought over all these dancers from Russia. So she had dancers coming in from the Bolshoi and the big ballets over there to visit. And this is it had become. It wasn't so much a touring company. It was just a few principal dancers would come over
Sure.
and dance with a few ballets here and there as like a featured artist, and then they stayed with us or stayed with somebody in the company in our town and hung out for a while, and then they went back. And it's just a fascinating way to kind of learn about a part of the world that we didn't know much about at the time.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. It's that walk in the person's shoes. But if
Right.
they're sleeping in your house and breaking bread with you too, that's certainly a way to do it.
Absolutely.
The organization did most of its work was sending groups overseas, but they also did receive a lot of groups from the Iron Curtain countries and toured them through the U.S.
Right.
And there were, it was some fascinating stuff. The Russian, the Leningrad Girls Choir was the group that came in
Right.
that summer, but there were a lot of difference. There was, and the disparity between the Iron Curtain countries and the U.S. was just so striking
Right.
at the time on so many different levels, the socioeconomic and freedoms, etc. That there was one group from I think Poland, and they were agronomists, and we did a tour for them through the U.S. And we called it after the tour. We called it the defectors tour because every city they would go to, there would be a few less, a few less, a few
Right.
less. So you would be contacting the homestay hosts in the next city and saying, we need, we need 8 houses less because we lost 16 on the last one.
Oh my gosh.
So maybe you start with 40 and you end up with 18 people on the flight home.
That was a thing. That was a thing in those days. Even the big stars you had, like I remember the news covering there was a plane stuck. I want to say it was stuck at JFK, and it was one of the big male dancers.
Barishnikov.
I think it was Goodenough. It was Alexander Goodenough, and he had declared he wanted to defect somehow to someone, and so the plane was staying. It wasn't going anywhere, and they waited till they figured this whole thing out, and eventually he somehow he got off the plane and became a Hollywood actor. Uh,
Yeah,
but
no, it was interesting. Even with the Leningrad Girls Choir, you could tell that because there was pretty easy to see who were the KGB
right.
on the tour.
Oh, that's funny.
Because you would see, 35 girls between the ages of, 10 and 18.
Right.
You would have the director, Vladimir Badulin, his accompanist, I forget her name, and then you would have two guys in their mid-30s who were just kind of hanging out. You're like, okay, you guys are the KGB, right? So they were the ones that were kind of babysitting everyone.
The security detail, right?
But I guess Poland didn't have that at the time.
Wow. Uh, yeah, I mean that's really interesting, but that's a whole interesting thing. And then you you started your own company at age 33.
Yeah.
So this is all still sort of a formative time in your life.
Yeah.
And
Well,
that's fascinating to me too, because I didn't start my company until fairly recently, in the last decade anyway, and I'm well established by that time. So the concept of starting your own business at a younger age wouldn't have even crossed my mind.
it was again. It was the situation. It was serendipitous. There was someone that I had done tours for one university,
Mm-hmm.
and I had probably been on 3 of the tours, and the last 2 tours or the last tour I was on with them, the tour manager for that trip, she and I got along very well, and fast forward, 2 years, they traveled every 2 years, and they were looking to tour, and at that point I had left the company,
Mm-hmm.
and there was a new director, and I didn't agree with the way things were going, so I left the company, and was kind of between work at that point. And this young woman reached out to me and said, "Hey, we want to go to Spain and Portugal, and would like you to do the tour." And I said, I'm no longer with that company. She said, "Yeah." I said, I'm not working for them. And she said, "Yeah, I know, but can you do it?" And I said, "Sure." And that's when it was because of that girl contacting me for that contract.
Right.
And I formed the company. I didn't know anything about any of this stuff, so I formed the company, and I got a bank account, and I did the work that I'd been doing over the last 7 years.
Right.
I just started doing it on my own. And yeah, did it that way, and it was interesting. I made an agreement with them at the time, because I wanted to do them a favor, since they were just. I was thankful that they were trusting me.
Right.
So I said, listen, this isn't normally how it's done, but what I would like to suggest is that I'll arrange your tour, and I'll charge you a flat rate per person. And it was a really low rate. It was like, for the amount of work involved, and I'll charge you a flat rate per person, and that'll be it. And I'm like, okay, sure, and they were fine with it,
Mm-hmm.
but they didn't really know how it was going to work out. Well, we had a payment schedule lined up,
Mm-hmm.
and it came time for the final payment was coming up. This is probably about 2 months before the trip.
Right.
Final payment was coming up, and I was talking to this young woman, and I said, she said, "Oh, we're doing some concert fundraising, etc., for the final payment."
Right.
And I said, "Actually, you don't have to worry about that." I said, "I've got all the final costs, and we came in well under budget, and so you don't have to pay that final payment, and also we're sending you a refund for an overpayment."
Wow.
So they were just blown away by that.
That's a nice surprise.
Yeah, oh yeah, it's a lovely surprise. Exactly. Hi, here's the thing. But and they've been my clients ever since. You know.
Perfect.
So
Yeah. Well, that's really interesting because that's another thing I talk about that a lot with every business person I deal with my clients even and how we're trying to communicate to their customers this idea of trust and how trust is really just a cornerstone to everything you do when you're doing it well, I think. And so this first one is all about trust. This little story of yours,
yeah, yeah, it's
you
interesting. One
know.
of the guy who was the president of the choir at the time, he went to he went to law school. I think it's at Stanford Law School, and he
Hmm.
called me up. I think a year or two later, and he said, "Hey, I um, I want to use you as like a case study for my law thing about the way you structured your contract." And I'm like, "Okay, is that a
Is,
thing?
is that a
You
good
know,
thing
is
or
that a good thing? Really?
am I the positive
Am I? Yeah, exactly.
or the
Am
don't
I a
do this?
pinata? Am I the idiot? I thought it was like a business thing. Like, hey,
Right.
here's a don't do this.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, I thought, yeah, I should. That's fine. But it's interesting. A lot of times, I think you can get caught up in um, I'm a business and I have to look like this and look like that and do this.
Right.
But at the end of the day, people just want to have good work.
Right.
They want to feel like they got a good deal.
Yeah.
Whatever that might mean. And
Right.
then if you do a good deal one time, for me, it's hopefully repeat business and make it easy for people to recommend you to other people. It's
Right.
everything, It's like
Right.
you want an electrician. Hey, can you recommend someone?
Right.
Do you have, well, this guy's good. What do they say? He's fast. He's really good. Uh, his prices are good. His prices are fair.
Right.
A lot of people, I used to think that if prices were, you want to get the cheapest price, but that's not the case. You
Right.
want someone to be fair. That's what you want.
Right.
You don't want it to be the cheapest unless the cheapest is the best work.
Right. Right. I mean, you don't want to be the discount brand most of the time, but you want to be, you want to feel like you're getting what you paid for, you know.
Sure.
Neil Gaiman, the writer, did this speech one time. He was talking about all about how he got started as a professional writer, and he started writing for other people and doing work for other people and whatever. And he said there were three things. Let me see if I can remember this properly. Three things he had to do. You have to be the work has to be really good. Uh, the work has to be on time. You have to live up to the promises you make, and you have to be pleasant to deal with. Right. And he said over time he discovered he didn't really need to have all three. He only needed to have two for any given client. If the work is good enough and the price is right and you live up to your everything you promise, uh, they don't they don't mind as much if you're a little
If
snarky.
you're a jerk. Yeah.
If you're a
You're
jerk,
right. You're right.
if you're easy to work with and the price is right and you live up to everything, they'll forgive the slipping of a deadline a little bit.
Yeah.
So it's like it's kind of it's a triangle, and if you have, as long as you have two of them anchored down, the
I
third
agree
got
with
to
that.
take care of itself. And I think there's a lot of truth to that,
Yeah.
because I think everybody kind of understands that too, because in their own life they have to if every once in a while you drop the ball on something, and we all do sooner or later. If you understand that that's part of what you're doing, we tend to be more forgiving. You know.
Particularly if you have a background with a group. Let's say
Right.
you've done multiple things. They know that your quality is consistent.
Right.
The McDonald'sization of stuff.
Right.
People want to know that. For us, we go to different countries, and people want to know if they go to this next country that the experience is going to be consistent with what they've had in the past, which is
Right.
hopefully a good experience.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
no, I agree with that. It's interesting how it always goes back to the power of three.
It's always kind of a magic number. It really is. But in your business, you deal with performing groups and tours kind of all over the world. So that has all kinds of different moving parts depending on what type of group it is, what type
Sure.
of trip it is, where you're going, all that kind of stuff. You mentioned to me a while ago you were working on something in South America, which is a whole different part of the world that I have no experience with South America at all myself.
Oh,
Uh,
fantastic. I mean,
yeah.
one of my favorite countries down there is Argentina.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, Argentina's wonderful. The seasons are reversed, so it's wintertime down there right now. They're moving
Right.
into winter.
Okay.
Crossing their fingers on that one with the virus. Everything
Sure.
is still shut down until September. Actually,
Right.
hotels, etc., are shut down until September.
Oh wow.
Um, but it's a wonderful country. They had a lot of European immigrants in the early 1900s.
Mm-hmm.
So that's flavored the more cosmopolitan Buenos Aires. But even if you get outside of the city, there are just some lovely cities further afield, and it's such a wonderful mix of European and South American at the same
Right.
time. It's great, and they have a wonderful music tradition. Um, there's a fantastic history for the region, so it's a fascinating destination, and I think people are pleasantly surprised when they get down there how comfortable it feels for them.
Right. What are and what type of groups do you deal with? You're dealing mainly sort of classical groups, singing groups, choirs,
Choral groups,
orchestras.
yeah, choral groups, orchestras, marching bands, jazz
Oh,
ensembles. So any performing group, and they're non-professional. So they
yeah.
can range from children's choirs to semi-professional adult orchestras.
Right.
Um, but they're all looking for exchange. They're all looking um, to be highlighted, to be featured,
Mm-hmm.
and to play in some beautiful venues. I mean,
Yeah.
and it's wonderful because this kind of business is different than people who go on a group tour and they, go to Italy
Right.
and they, they look out the window and they see X, Y, and Z.
Right.
It's like Clark Griswold. What is he? Went to the Grand Canyon. Like, okay, and you get in the car and you're like, but with the performing groups, there's so many opportunities. I mean, the nature of the performance alone is you are going and you're meeting other people.
Right.
You're going to perform. You're going on this tour and you are giving to people.
Right.
That's the big difference. So you're not going to take everywhere you go.
Wow.
You're going to perform. You're going to and these are free concerts 95% of the time. They're giving
Right.
a free performance.
Wow.
And we'll try to connect with the local charity and say, how can this performance be a benefit to your community? And that opens up doors because they're
Okay.
kind of, they're taken aback sometimes because a lot of times they're used to Americans coming in and saying, give me this, give me that, give me that.
Right.
So when you come in and you say, what can we do for you?
Right.
There, it opens up doors and it opens up hearts and minds, as they say.
Right. It shifts the whole perception of it, and so
And
they're
it
I mean
makes
they're
people
really
think.
right, and so I mean they're your clients are really we talk about in marketing land, we talk about what does your client want, what does your customer want, and to me it's they want an experience that they can't get any other way, right?
They are 95% of the directors and the groups. Let me just put aside, there's one type of director who is going for the glory.
Yeah.
There is. I can name probably on one hand the number of directors I've come across over 30 years who want that.
I won't
Those
ask
are
you
the
to name
ones.
them.
They're the ones that are in it for themselves,
Right.
not so much the groups, and they're kind of, taking the kids for a ride, and they'll perform, a concert every day or every other day, and
Oh wow.
and exhaust it,
Right.
the group. But 95% of the other directors and the travelers, the performers themselves,
Hmm.
are looking. They're looking to sing in nice venues,
Hmm.
be it historic. Sometimes the historic ones are not the acoustically best. To
Right.
sing in a nice acoustic venue, to sing for an audience, and to maybe have exchange with another group, share the stage with someone, or to meet with someone, have social time with them after the fact. Um, and that's really the that's the opportunity there.
Right.
To be able to sing for someone, to go into a community, to be able to do something for them, and then be able to socialize with them afterwards.
Yeah, to sort of make a connection, like even going back to that first one where you had the group, the girl singing group up and down the East Coast. They were staying in homes and whatever.
Oh yeah.
It may not have been the purpose of that, but the benefit of it is that they get to make those connections with real people.
Oh, it's tremendous, and the what can come of that simple interaction, because it's either it can happen in an evening
Yep.
at a concert, or it can happen over the course of several nights if someone is staying in a home. But I've seen directors. There was a director in the Midwest who went to Bratislava, Slovakia,
Hmm.
and met a music teacher there. They fell in love and they got married.
That's awesome.
They're now living and raising a family in the Midwest. I've seen college kids go to Russia, come back from Russia, and change their major to Russian studies.
Wow.
So there's a worst case scenario is that people are going to come away with an awareness that there are other things on the planet other than the United States.
Right.
Open up their perspective a little bit. You also when you're overseas, you come to appreciate the things that you miss about the states.
Right.
And then when you come back to the states, there are a couple things maybe from the other country that you're like,
Right.
that's kind of cool. I wish we had that here.
Right. Right. I mean, I remember. I am not nearly as world traveled as you, but I have cousins in Ireland and Northern Ireland, and I've been to Britain and Scotland and all. But the thing I always noticed most, the thing I took away from my trips over there, was always this sense of um, time and this sense of history that European cities have that we don't have here. It's like, so when you go and talk about this old building, and I laugh here because moving to Florida 5 years ago, we don't have the sense of history that we even had in the Northeast.
Sure.
So a 200-year-old building was ancient.
Oh, I know.
Where
I
I
know.
grew up, and you go over there, and it's like you're looking at millennia. Some
You
of
know,
these buildings.
and it's interesting because we come back with that take, and we're like, oh, we love and it's
Mhm.
true. I mean, you got to love the history and everything else
Yeah.
behind it, and even for I toured with a brilliant mixed choir from East Tennessee State University,
Hmm.
and they were just fantastic. And there was a venue in Italy that we went into, and it was a very historic church, and I forget the exact venue, but it was a beautiful church. Mozart had performed there. It's like one of those Mozart had performed just about everywhere, but Mozart performed there, and and that always, that history always strikes me. And that evening, I just said to them before the concert, I said, just remember that you are singing in a place that Mozart performed in, X amount of years ago.
Right.
And if you can imagine that, the notes that Mozart sang are in stones in the walls, and you're
Right.
adding your voices and your notes to that same stone. So,
Right.
just to give a little bit of perspective. But the flip side of that is I heard from more than one person in my travels in Europe about how they loved the United States, and they loved how things could change and you could do different things and how you could build things in different places, and they liked the dynamic of the states. So it's kind of funny because we love the solidness, this cathedral has been here for 1,000 years
Right.
sort of thing, and there are those in Europe who appreciate the dynamism that we have in the United States. So everyone's always kind of, the grass is always greener sometimes.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny because it's always, we, what is it? They say change is hard for people, right? But, and the other thing they say about New York City is the only thing you can be sure of in New York City is that things are going to change.
Yeah.
One building's going to get knocked down, another one's going to get built up right in its place, and even if it's something, that had a history and a love and a fan base.
Well, thank you for
Those
Jeff
things.
Dionissus and the New York Preservation Society.
Absolutely, absolutely. And some things, it's an interesting what dichotomy of perspective on how to maintain and capture the history and appreciate the history of a place, and yet still be a vibrant, growing, thriving city. Uh,
Yeah.
or and even in businesses too. I mean, you can't. We're talking about how we started this conversation was, um, how many people and businesses are finding new ways to do things now because they have to, and you can't hold on. If it's ever been clear, it's clear now that you can't hold on to everything you've always done in the past just because you like it. You have to hang on to it because it's
Well,
doing
you can
it's
hang
doing
on for your, at your own peril.
well. That's it. You have to be able to adjust and change and grow and all that. So what do you see? What's how's your next steps? How's your future looking at the moment?
Um, I think the future. Listen, travel is going to come around.
Hmm.
Uh, I have my thoughts about some ideas that I think people are definitely going to want to gather. There's going to be huge parties, and I think
Absolutely.
there is going to be a whether people realize it or not, there is going to be this innate desire to gather together um, in a large way. And I'm not talking just family gatherings or seeing your friends. It's just um, uh, gathering together. The what this virus has done for group performances, and in this case, I'm talking about um, bands and orchestras and choirs, particularly. It's made everything virtual,
Right.
which doesn't work by any stretch of the imagination. Um, and all of these directors are kind of facing this existential crisis of, we can't gather together as singers. I can't teach a group together. Um, and so when people can do that, this is, you have to imagine that since March, going through most likely until possibly even June of next year, people will not be allowed to join together to sing together.
Right.
Choirs will not be allowed to sing together.
Right.
Orchestras will not be allowed to play together unless you have some crazy little cocoon thingy going on.
Right.
Um, so there will be a huge need for that.
Hmm.
We are social animals, and you know, there's going to be a huge need for it. And I think the first step for me is to figure out what kind of to set up an opportunity for people to get together to sing,
Right.
and to make those arrangements. The question is timing, and the question is, what genre of group. Choirs are a lot of different types, etc. So that's
Well,
always
right.
the thing. As far as timing, that's everyone's best guess.
Well, right. I mean, there's that, but I think you're right. You're hitting on something really interesting there. In that, I think because of the time we've had without it right now, and I mean, your specialty is one type of music, but any kind of music, any kind of performance. I talked to a friend who's a costumer on Broadway, and they still don't know what's going on there. Um, that when we do get back to a space and a time when we experience an event like that, a performance like that, we're going to have a whole new energy, where we're reminded why we liked it in the first place.
Yeah, and
Why that was important to us in the first place.
and I think there will be those um, who maybe weren't the biggest fans of a live performance. I'm not a huge concert goer as far as non-classical.
Right.
I'm not a huge concert goer, but I had tickets to go to the PNC Arts Center
Right.
in August, and probably the first concert I'd done in a couple of years.
Hmm.
And I was disappointed.
Yeah.
It was
Yeah.
getting. Um, So I think there will be those who maybe even weren't regular concert goers who will be leaning a little bit towards going to a concert,
Right.
because we've been isolated for so long, and it's just unnatural,
Right.
you know.
Right. Right.
So kind of, when you veer in one end of the scale, or the one swing of the pendulum veers dramatically in one end,
Mhm.
it's going to swing dramatically in the other end, at least initially on
Yeah.
the return.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I'm looking forward to that, honestly. when
Yeah.
when we can go do these things and feel safe about it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You
I
know,
agree.
yeah. So, hey, thanks so much. I have a whole list of other things I want to talk to you about, but we'll get to those another time.
You bet. Well, thanks for having me.
Hey, absolutely. It was a great conversation. I really appreciate it, and good luck with everything. And stay in touch, stay safe, take care of your people.
Will do. I will do that. Same to you.
All right, so that's Sean Fagan, with a business that's been really hard hit these days, but is looking forward and looking up and looking out. And I find his perspective to be pretty inspiring to me. I hope you guys did too. I hope you enjoyed it. Be safe out there. If you find yourself enjoying the StoryForge podcast, please give us a review at Apple Podcasts, or we're on Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. It helps others find the show and hopefully enjoy it as much as you do. All recording, editing, and executive producing tasks are handled by yours truly, Lyle Smith of Nimblesmith, the content marketing agency. This podcast would not be possible without the sincerely excellent help of our friend and associate producer Anthony Sergi, who produces numerous podcasts, including the truly excellent A Guest in the House about all things hip-hop. The music on the podcast was provided by Jody Nardone and the Jody Nardone Trio, Lights Will Guide You Home album. And if you'd like to send us questions or feedback or suggestions for other subjects or guests, you can reach us through the StoryForge website. That's thestoryforge.com, all words separated by hyphens. Or you can email us at cheers@nimblesmith.com, spelled NymbleSmith. Thanks very much.